Lords, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to Parliament and specifically to Portcullis House. And great to see so many people here, so enthusiastic about this event and of course the work that we've been doing about women's suffrage. The Works of Art Committee, of which I'm really privileged to be a member, has been striving for some years to represent the campaign for women's suffrage in Parliament. We have acquired some wonderful historical objects, including the WSPU medal awarded to Emmeline Pankhurst in 1908, following her imprisonment for inciting the rush on Parliament, a pin badge from the National Union of Suffrage Societies, and it's something that always really strikes me that in this day and age, when we're out campaigning, we tend to think that big is best, and we have huge, disgusting, tasteless rosettes, whereas the Women's Suffrage Societies had tiny, tiny pin badges. And I think one of the real gems in the collection, the WSPU flag, which when the committee decided to purchase it, we were all struck at what wonderful condition it was in after all these years. Some of the objects are on display in the Women in Parliament exhibition, which hangs in the corridors outside this room. And we also have two permanent public exhibitions in the main palace. Parliament and Votes for Women, which was installed in 2008, and its larger successor, Women in the Vote, which was installed in 2012 and is still on display. Important though these exhibitions are, they have not been sufficient to commemorate the long and hard-won campaign for the enfranchisement of women. Indeed, this year we're celebrating 750 years since the de Montfort Parliament and 800 years since the sealing of Magna Carta. And it is disappointing to reflect that it is not yet even 100 years since women have had the right to vote or be an MP in this country. The idea of creating a work of art to commemorate women's suffrage was raised in 2013, and in early 2014 the Works of Art Committee proposed an artistic residence which would allow an artist into this place, into Parliament, to explore the history of women's suffrage and develop a proposal for an artwork. We felt that it was important to allow the artists themselves to decide on the most appropriate form for the commemorative artwork. And we appointed Mary Branson as artist in residence to women's suffrage after interviewing a fantastically competitive shortlist of artists. There was an open call for applications, and as somebody who took part in the interview process, I can honestly say that the standard and the quality of the artists who came forward was absolutely incredible. Mary was certainly very well qualified to take on this residency. She has a fine art degree from the Surrey Institute, an MA in Art and Space from Kingston University, and was nominated for the Beck's Future Prize back in 2005. She has received commissions from the Arts Council and the British Council, amongst others, and has exhibited throughout the UK and in China. In 2013, her design from the competition for a permanent memorial to Emily Wilding Davison, her design won, and that is to be placed in Epsom. Mary presented the committee with her proposal last autumn, and we were really extremely impressed with the artwork that she had proposed, not only because of the way it reflects her residency research, but because of its dynamic nature, its sophistication, and importantly in this place, its suitability for the building and the site. Whilst also being, I have to say, a very welcome contemporary piece of art for the collection. We've been delighted to be able to commission Mary to produce the work, and she is currently in the research and development phase before finalising the detail of the design. Now, I know that you're all anxious to see the proposal, so without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce the artist, Mary Branson.
Well, thank you very much, and what I thought I'd do for my presentation today is to talk about the journey that I had to create this piece of artwork. And so where I wanted to start was when I came for the interviews, I was actually doing a commission for the Emily Davison Memorial in Epsom. And so my understanding of women's suffrage was all around Emily Davison, but actually I had no other knowledge. So I was sort of like a sponge when I came to this residency, and it's been a real eye-opening journey for me. So The first place that I was introduced to was by Mary in the archives. And I think Melanie and Mary understood that as an artist I wanted something that was really visually beautiful, and as a way of introducing myself to Parliament and understanding the space. And the first space was the Act Room. And it's a visual feast for artists because it's such a historic, beautiful space. Not many of the public know about it. And there's colour coding within the scrolls. And they're all the acts are on vellum. And then you have the really large scrolls, and they're residing next to really small personal acts. So it had a really strong visual language for me, and that was the place that I started. And from then I moved on, and Mary suggested that I looked at the Sergeant at Arms reports. And in here, the reason why I started looking at these was to understand what was happening with the protests that were taking place within Parliament, where the protesters were, what kind of protests there were, and when I started going through all the information and the forms, I started to realise that there was the information about Emily Davison and the information about Emmeline Pankhurst, but what was really grabbing me was that there was so much information about women that I'd never heard of, and the amount of women that were going through, coming to protest, and the age range, and all the places throughout the country that they were travelling from and coming into Parliament. And also it was looking at the way that Parliament was reacting to those protests as well. Another part of my research was that I was going out and I was meeting historians and getting my hands on actual artefacts. And this is a Women's Freedom League banner, and I went to see Irene Cockcroft, and it brought home to me, once you actually start holding the actual banners, or that you start to see the wine stains on them, and you start realising that the people that were protesting and trying to raise the awareness of women's rights were people like you and I. And if you were going out and that you were doing, going out and travelling and trying to get the information across, that it must have been a terrifying experience. And I wanted to get across, I was starting to feel that I wanted to make a piece of work that reflected the bravery of the women, and that, they were ordinary women like you or I. Whilst I was doing that, I was also aware that I didn't know the scale of the movement. Yes. So I wasn't aware of the scale of the movement, and as an installation artist, I needed to understand how big the artwork needed to be. So I went back into the archives and I started researching how many petitions were put in front of Parliament before we got the vote. And I asked Mary if that had been done before, and it hadn't, so it's a piece of historical research that I did. And actually, when I first started to do that research, I thought that I could document every petition and where they were all coming from in the country, so that I could collate some kind of geographical information. But actually what happened was that when I started recording the information, the petitions started to snowball, and I wasn't able to record all that information because of the immense number, and there were 16,500 petitions, and it blew me away, because I'd never realised that it was such a large movement and so many people had petitioned, and so I realised that I needed to reflect that in the artwork that I was going to make. So the building, so part of the brief was to find a space within Parliament, And when I first arrived here, I found that was a really daunting prospect, because everywhere I was within Parliament was really, really busy. It was full. It was beautiful, but very full. And it was like, where am I going to put an artwork, and where am I able to put an artwork that's a large artwork? And I kept on getting drawn back to Westminster, and it felt as though it fitted because of the location, from looking at the archive reports and the way that that was where the protests were taking place. That's where women were barred from Parliament. And so this is where I kept on coming back to. And when I was interviewing MPs and people that worked within Parliament, and asking them, where would you want a space, and had you ever considered this area? It was interesting, no one knew about this space. Everyone knew where I was talking about, but no one ever actually knew about this space up here. It's completely overlooked. That's what it's like with a close-up. It's in darkness. It was always meant to have a space. It was always meant to have an artwork in that space, but it never got commissioned. So I got very excited, and I started putting the word out that this is where potentially I would like to put a piece of art. And so another conversation that I was having with a lot of people within the building was that because the building is very masculine, it's very dark, it's quite cold, and it was like I wanted to inject the building with a very strong feminine energy and a warmth, and I wanted it to be powerful. And I kept on coming back to this image, and I felt as though I wanted to put in a new dawn. I'd seen that a lot on the imagery for the Votes for Women insignia, and I thought, well, that's what I would like to do. That was sort of like my gut feeling, but I didn't want to just put that onto the artwork because it is really important. So I went back to the London Museum to look at all the insignia and all the banners, and this image of the New Dawn kept on coming up over and over again. And so I decided that yes, that was something that would be right to include in the artwork. The other thing that I wanted to include into the artwork was when I started going through the images, was they kept on coming up. I think it's a very British thing. The weather keeps on showing up. I think it's because we're an island, and we talk obsessively about the weather. So, but in all the it kept on I kept on seeing images of the weather when it was when the Votes for Women images were coming up. And also one of the things that came up was not being able to hold back the tide of change. And I felt as though that was a really important thing that I wanted to include in the artwork. So this is an image of the proposal that I'm wanting to put into the space. So it's a okay. Okay, I've shown you now. It is, it's deceptively looks small on here, but actually the space is very big. So the space above that doorway is 6 meters by 4 meters. It's it's 168 glass scrolls. The glass is to represent the scroll ends. All the colours, maybe go to the next image. So these are all going to be hand-blown glass scrolls. All the colours of the suffrage organisations are going to be held within the artwork, and underneath each of the, it's held on a portcullis-like structure. The only colours that aren't within this artwork is the green, and the green is the wall behind, which is the Pugin wallpaper behind. So the artwork is tied to Parliament and the relationship it has within Parliament. It's an open portcullis, so it's the idea that we were barred from Parliament, and now the door is above the doorway, the door is open, and we're there, we're in there. The way I work with a lot of craftspeople, and I would be working with, this is a guy, oh, it's going in slow motion, which is very exciting. This is Adam Marison. So when I work as an installation artist, I like to work with as many top craftspeople as possible to realise my work. So we'd be working together to create the glass scrolls and looking at the colours, and also incorporating into the surface of the glass scrolls silver. So it's a very contemporary piece of work, but it also is able to reside within that very historic site. I'm going to move on from there because that one's not working so well. So the idea is that each of the glass scrolls is backlit, and this is just a test sample, but from a distance. So when you're standing on the ground in front of the artwork and you're looking up, the idea is that you'll be able to see the silhouette which creates the scrolls. The other part of the artwork is that it is linked into now. So it's linked into the tide. So the artwork will grow in intensity with the light, with the changing of the tide. So the idea, anyway, if I can get the slide to work, is that the work grows in intensity. So as the high tide comes, the work becomes stronger, and then it falls back again into being slightly lower lit. And that enables the artwork to be placed in the now. And it's about the work that women are doing now in Parliament and outside Parliament as well. So there you go. That's the artwork. That's it.